Ad podcast, coming to you with a special edition. We normally stream Mondays at 1 o'clock West Coast, but we've got a special guest today, Matt O'Connor, who's the CEO of AdQuick, and want to make time for him during his busy schedule. And we're going to talk to you guys about the emerging trend of how outdoor media is really catching up to the rest of digital marketing as far as measurement and attribution. And Matt is leading the charge there with his company AdQuick, and has some insightful information for us. So Matt, first of all, thanks for coming on the show.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Excited to chat.
Right on, man. So, I think what is always exciting about founders and really any startup venture, but specifically in and around the marketing and the ad tech space, is when you identify a cumbersome solution or a cumbersome issue out there in the marketing or advertising ecosystem. And then you get so obsessed with that problem that it haunts you enough that you go out and decide to do something about it. And from all the research that I've done on you, it sounds like you had some interesting challenges as a marketer, mainly when you were at Instacart, maybe a little bit at Amazon, but mainly Instacart. And as you were going through rapid growth and expansion at Instacart, you just kept coming up with this idea of, hey, we should probably be doing outdoor and billboards, but just kind of coming up against, how hard that is as a fast growing startup to actually execute, especially when you're thinking about going market to market, like a double-sided marketplace like Instacart. So can you just, first of all, tell us a little bit about your background and the steps that led you to become the CEO of AdQuick, and more specifically, why was this a problem that was haunting you and something that you felt like you needed to solve?
Yeah, so you mentioned the Instacart experience, which I might now describe as kind of the fertilizer. The initial seed was actually like 6 or 7 years prior to that, where I had a bootstrap startup, ended up failing, but in the process, we wanted to get a bus shelter in Maryland. And so I wasn't in market, so I couldn't see who actually owned it. And I was like, okay, maybe I can Google this. Reached out to a bunch of contact us forums, and then eventually heard back, and it was too expensive for us. So we passed, but I was like, why is this so slow? Why is it hard to find? And then in that case, we had a couple $100. So I figured maybe the customer experience was bad because, I was an SMB and not really worth getting a good customer experience from some of the larger companies. So fast forward to Instacart, where, we're going rapid expansion, trying to raise our profile in every market. And after about a year and change of being there, we had raised some venture money. So our marketing channels were getting more robust. And, we started with paid online just because you can light it up so easily. Then in Indianapolis, I'll not ever forget it, because we said, hey, let's get some billboards. And so the team and I, reached out for quotes. Basically, 5-6 years later, the process hadn't changed. And this was bigger budget. We were somewhat of a known company. And I was like, geez, this still hasn't evolved. Is this passing inconvenience so long ago, and it's still archaic to buy? The catalyst this time was that we actually did get the billboards. They went up a little bit later because of the process, so we missed the launch date. But they went up. We heard a ton of great anecdotes, and we saw directional lift in our user acquisition in those markets. So we were figuring, hey, this definitely works. Like, did the media owners send us any analytics, or can we tell explicitly how well they worked? And the answer was, unfortunately, no. So, with our kind of lens in marketing, which was very ROI and attribution focused, and the fact that it was kind of a pain, we said, what, we'll just do a couple billboards occasionally. And it was basically just back to the bottom of the stack as far as our marketing budgets were concerned. So then, I knew the customer side could be dramatically improved with, a better interface, kind of aggregating inventory, and then also having built-in analytics, almost directly analogous to the way you buy advertising online. You set your parameters, you execute it, you get a dashboard for, installs, lift, user acquisition, all right there. So that's really what we've been building with AdQuick, is that streamlined end-to-end interface for the advertiser. and then integrations and software to bring the media owners inventory online. And that was just one last little anecdote, is that I figured, it was like a really popular restaurant. They don't need to have great customer service because they're at 100% capacity, and you can't get a reservation for months. But when I talked to some of the media owners, they were like, no, actually, we run at 30 to 40% underutilization. We just don't
Wow.
have the software to be able to give customers a kind of modern buying experience. And so, that was another pain point where we felt like if we can fit in between those two, we can lift both sides. And that's what we've been trying to do.
That's awesome. So, one thing that I came across in the research, and I think this is, a big challenge for marketers a lot is, how do I leverage targeting with my outdoor campaigns, right? And I think you mentioned a lot that you can now, as a brand, if you have a robust first-party data set, you can actually overlay that on the AdQuick platform and really understand where not only it's not efficient maybe to come in and buy an entire city or entire geo just because that's a market that you're entering, but you really still want to make sure you're getting in front of the right eyeballs. So how do you guys leverage first party data and other data sources to make sure advertisers are not only just getting efficient outdoor buys, but actually getting in front of the eyeballs that matter to them?
Yeah, and I'll get to that, but set the table really quickly in that out of home, I think, is one of the most uh, volatile is the wrong, high variance mediums, market to market, where New York City and LA can be $25 to $50 CPMs, whereas
Mm,
Atlanta or Minneapolis can be $5 or below. So there's a ton of variance market to market, and that's the foundation and one of the things that we help advertisers navigate at scale. So based on that high variance, advertiser can be and should be looking at a multitude of markets, and the wider their aperture, the more opportunity they allow for. So the way we kind of bridge first party data and other audiences is that if an advertiser, they'll often be doing digital first. That's kind of an obvious statement, but they'll have all this signal from those campaigns. Where are they kind of organically converting the highest? Where are their click-through rates the highest? We can take all this data, overlay it over a national or international map, and show them here's where the arbitrage is for you. So, for instance, with high organic conversion, something resonates in that market already. That might be an opportunity to really double down in those particular markets. And with more and more companies being kind of direct to consumer, omni-channel, they're not limited by a physical footprint necessarily. It's amazing for them because they can work their way up from the lowest cost markets on up. Whereas we unfortunately hear so many false negatives from advertisers where they say, oh, we tried out of home. They either think it didn't work or they didn't, know what to look for is the biggest thing. So we'll say, hey, where did you buy and why, and how did you measure it? And their answers to those questions are really kind of sad because they just bought in their home market because they knew it, and they didn't measure any of the things that we can now surface, which are, a lot more than just brand building. I think my favorite term for it is performance branding. Of course,
hmm
millions of people are seeing it, but then what are those people doing is dramatically more valuable to most companies than, just the impression.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I listened somewhere where you guys actually have the ability to tap into 8 different attribution sources. Like you can sync your Google AdWords account and you can see the incremental lift and or decrease in your cost per click or your cost per acquisition in Google in the comparative markets that you're running against. So it seems like the measurement side is definitely catching up, even though this is considered a traditional channel that is hard to measure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's honestly the most exciting thing to me is that, at a high level, think about all the things you, me, anyone as a consumer can do after they see a billboard that resonates with them. Nowadays, they can Google that brand. They can download their app. They can go to their website so that they can go to their store. So there's all these other, actions that consumers can take that normally get unassociated with out of home, and it's so therefore not kind of built into the ROI calculation. So with modern ad tech, pixels on the site, mobile application intelligence, apps, flyers, branch mobiles of the world, you can easily share that data. And then we can show advertisers what their lift was up and down the funnel. And, 90% and the most valuable 90% of the funnel is a complete blind spot for most companies doing out of home. So when you actually can see, yes, millions of people saw it. Yes, our brand awareness went up. Oh, but also we had all these site visitors. They converted higher than our average because they're primed. Maybe they click through on our ads more frequently because, again, they're primed. When you actually look at the full funnel data, the ROI is much greater than when you kind of just buy some billboards and hope for the best.
Nice. And are you seeing things like the reemergence of QR codes post-COVID? It's funny how like QR codes were dead on delivery before COVID, and then you see them as the star of a Super Bowl campaign, and now you can't escape a QR code, which I think is actually a good innovation because it was always a cool product. It just was kind of before its time, like so many things, and COVID gave it a second lifespan. But are you seeing are there areas of direct attribution where you can, measure a little bit more closely than kind of longitudinal, other sources that are maybe guides, but can't really drive full attribution?
Yeah, QR codes are definitely a prevalent way to give a 100% attributable mechanism for advertiser or consumers to act on an ad they see. It's a bit limited in that they can only be, or they're only useful on street level kind of subway ads or bus shelters, somewhere where somebody could physically scan the QR code. And the vast majority of out of home is billboards, taxi tops, things that are unscannable. But it's a great mechanism and definite thing to use every time you're doing anything street level, because you get 100% attribution and you give the consumer a way to act in the moment.
That's awesome. So I think I heard somewhere else where you're a big proponent that all types of companies should be doing outdoor in some way, and then I think a lot of times B2B companies are a little bit more hesitant to go into traditional consumer channels because it's seen a little bit like shooting a pigeon with an elephant gun, I suppose. But how do smart B2B marketers leverage outdoor in a way that can be impactful, such as buying a billboard? I'd be curious have you as a B2B marketer, have you guys ever bought, billboards by ad agencies that you want to do business with, or brands you want to do business with, or conquested an airport, during an important conference? Could you talk a little bit about how B2B marketers should be taking advantage of outdoor?
Yeah. So on the use cases that we've done, we were originally and technically still are based in LA. So we had some Regency billboards right by LAX, the ones that are, hard, impossible to miss as you drive by. They're almost street level, but they're massive. Book this billboard at adquick.com. We've done a couple kind of CMO conquesting where we know where the headquarters of a target brand is and where the likely thoroughfare is. Get that board and say, hey, Dylan, check out AdQuick. So you can literally personalize it. And then just to segue to the broader B2B market, and one of the things that you mentioned earlier, one of the great use cases is uploading a CRM where you can find all your target companies, the concentration of them, and then target the most low cost billboards around the high concentration of your customers. And then the other big one is events. So you could have thousands of target buyers going into Vegas or Boston, anywhere a conference is. You have a high concentration of your target audience, and you can light up the city basically and make your brand unmissable. The good and the bad of B2B is that there's usually a smaller pool of buyers, so you do have to be pretty hyper targeted. But the good thing is the LTVs of a B2B product are almost always 5, 6, 7 figures plus, so you get a couple actual primed leads and it warms them up for your sales team. That's incredibly valuable. So you have to be a little bit more targeted, and those are some of the ways that B2B marketers tend to use out of home the most effectively.
That's awesome. So I think something that's been in the news a lot is the debut of the Sphere in Las Vegas. I feel like that's a kind of an insightful innovation in outdoor, right? Like these kind of larger. I mean, we've seen it in Times Square and a few other areas. Places that are implementing kind of the 3D outdoor, where it can kind of almost seem like something's coming out of the building at you because of the way that the digital billboards are set up. So there's always been a lot of innovation in outdoor, especially in key places like Times Square. But I feel like the Sphere is kind of taking it to a whole new level. Do you feel like there's going to be a lot more of what we would call these kind of mega outdoor installations where you can see it almost from anywhere in town and it becomes almost like a ubiquitous component of a city like Vegas?
Yeah, I don't really have a informed opinion on that. I mean, I think the Sphere has been, super noteworthy. I haven't seen it myself, but by all visuals, it looks absolutely incredible. And so I would think that there's going to be more based on the initial success, just generally. But one thing that's for absolute certain is the cost of digital signage and the hardware is pretty much on a downward trajectory very quickly. And so, where I'm certain you will see and are already seeing things are more screens in more places. So, in the backs of Ubers, taxi tops, turning vacant walls into signage is actually a really big revenue stream for cities. And so, the last contract I just saw in a headline was that LA is going to make something like 400 million over a number of years for an outdoor advertising contract. So it's a serious
Wow.
revenue driver for municipalities. And then with the hardware costs coming down, those locations are propagating, and that creates more opportunity for advertisers. Now, how quickly and how many spheres are going to be built, I don't know. But it definitely seems like something that is not going to be a standalone thing, and more cities and more places will do it.
That's cool. So I want to pivot quickly to kind of the social aspect of outdoor campaigns. And this is a place that's really exciting for an agency like ours that has mainly been pulled into outdoor advertising campaigns when it's tied into a larger social media campaign. We talked a little bit in the pre-show that my agency worked on the Delta and Tinder dating wall in Brooklyn that Wyden and Kennedy did. And then we also did a campaign with Saatchi where the RAV4 bought out a interactive billboard in Times Square and turned it into a rock climbing wall. And then our job as the influencer agency was to find the influencers that were going to, get a crowd down there in the middle of the day and then watch the influencers climb up and down the billboards. Is there a campaign that comes to mind that you guys were a part of, or one that you guys have observed that had an inherently social component that really stands out to you as brands or agencies that are doing this kind of work well?
Yeah. So one that comes to mind that we did was for OVO clothing brand back years ago, and this sort of put it on our radar, which was we bought or they bought the location through the platform. It was an artist of his called PopCon. And what we noticed was tons of people were sharing it. It was in New York City. And we're like, whoa, this is really cool. Another kind of ripple effect and reverberation. There was no call to action, no hashtag, just people thought it was cool and they liked him. So they shared it. And so that was the first time it really got on our radar. And this was in our very early days. But since then, a lot of, either very clever or influencer celebrity based advertising will be shared. I think it's the most shared channel by quite a long shot. And you can, as a regular consumer, you can think, I've probably never shared a banner ad I saw online, maybe once in a blue moon on TV. But when you see something in the real world that stands out and has somebody, you're really likely to share it. And the data shows that about 70% of people have actually shared an outdoor advertisement over their lifetime. So it's really high. And yeah, it's one of those things that, in all marketing and definitely out of home, you're trying to get your message across in more or less an instant, a couple seconds. And when you have a high profile, face associated with your brand, that's the quickest way to get name association. I know another one that wasn't through us, but anybody from Chicago will know Brian Urlacher is on the hair loss billboards all throughout Chicago because he's a famous guy, formerly bald guy, and you see those everywhere. So I think anybody who has a spokesperson or an influencer should have them somewhere massively visual, and then that dovetails into all the social aspects too, because people want to share their favorite influencers, celebrities, etc.
Yeah, that's that kind of ties into another trend that I wanted to ask you about. So, one thing that we've seen that's an interesting development on the influencer space is that we've seen a lot of influencers actually do outdoor campaigns for their own brands. So it's not uncommon to go down to Times Square and see influencers, whether it's Mr. Beast or others, actually like showing up in Times Square, not on behalf of a brand, but just advertising their own brand. I remember Ninja, who was like a big gaming influencer based in Chicago. A couple of years back, he had billboards all over LA, just advertising his own personal brand. Can you comment on, kind of that interesting dynamic that somebody that starts out as an inherently social brand or an influencer brand, then kind of having to tap into traditional channels to even expand their own brand?
Yeah. I think it comes down to the fact that because it's in the real world, it's an incredibly legitimizing channel.
Mm.
And, both with influencers, but also, up and coming brands, when you don't mean anything to the consumer, it's tough for them to know you, value you, etc. When you have real world advertising, you're there, you're unignorable, and there's some kind of gravitas to having advertising large scale, real world, that just is kind of just street cred, is kind of the layman's way I'd put it. And so I think that's where influencers like it. Obviously, it doubles as content, so that's driving a lot of the influencer world, is the kind of IRL to online interplay. And so both of those things apply, even outside of influencers, but I think especially so.
That's cool. I also read in an interview that you talked about how, some of the most fastest growing advertiser categories inside of the outdoor space are, one, cannabis, which we've kind of, it was enlightening to kind of hear the reasons that outdoor advertising is the one advertising medium that isn't regulated by the federal government. So therefore they are able to do outdoors. So that was kind of interesting to learn that history of why you see cannabis brands even being able to leverage that channel. But I think the other category that maybe surprised me a little bit was the emergence of direct-to-consumer brands going on outdoor campaigns. And I think it makes sense. And you pointed out that they can, in past times when advertisers were maybe constricted by their relationships with retailers or big box stores, they ultimately could only buy outdoor in close proximity to places where people could buy their products. But those handcuffs have been taken off in a way. So can you talk to kind of the emergence of their direct consumer category and why they're moving into the outdoor space kind of quicker than other categories?
Yeah, I can. But first, I have to give you props for your research and questions in a very short period. We haven't been scheduling maybe a day or two this week, and the depth of your questions and research is amazing. So I have to give you a quick plug there.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
But on the D2C side, the thing we hear most often is, and then, we can back into kind of the logic as to why we'd hear it, is that the arbitrage is often gone out of most of the online platforms.
Yeah.
The reasoning that makes sense to me that I've heard is that even 7 to 10 years ago, a lot of the actual online execution was still somewhat manual, wasn't fully programmatic. And what happens as it's now, I think, close to 90% of digital and online ads are programmatically executed, what happens is that because the algorithms are so good, the highest bidder and the deepest pockets win. So D2C had an advantage for a while because they were crafty with either their messaging, targeting, they could find niches online that were undiscovered. But now that everything is programmatic, P&G is going to outbid the D2C detergent brand every single day of the week. So they've lost arbitrage. There is still a lot of arbitrage left in out of home because of a lot of the reasons I won't go back to all the reasons that I mentioned before, but it's legitimizing one big challenge for D2C, and there's still a fair amount of arbitrage left if you do it right.
Wow, that's cool. And then I imagine, you talked a little bit about, the cumbersome, why out of home is really only 4% of the market, even though it represents this massive opportunity. And obviously you guys are taking the friction out of that, both on the supply side and the measurement side. I hate to ask you to bite the hand that feeds you a little bit, but there's so much conversation these days around in-housing. And it seems to me like a platform like yours gives a brand an opportunity to potentially do this kind of work in-house, because really, the cumbersomeness of not knowing who to have to call, a out-of-home company not taking you seriously because you're too small or you only represent one buyer. I mean, that really was the place of the media agency, right? To have those relationships, build bulk buying power across the nation in these formats, whether it's TV, print, outdoor. And it seems like a solution like yours should allow a brand to go direct to consumer in their media buying operation as well through in-housing. Do you see more work on the brand side coming through your platform, or do you guys have media agency clients as well?
Yeah, we have both. And so, we're supercharging agencies where, instead of having their team do everything manually, go back to the client with sort of half-baked recommendations and no ROI, we can white label the platform, and all of a sudden they have a platform that's sit next to their trade desk or DV360, and their team are overnight out of home experts by virtue of all the data and the processes in the platform. We definitely have a lot of direct brands. That's the world we knew. And for in-house brands, they love it. It's like either where has this been, or if they're more modern, it's like, oh, this is like how everybody does it, right? And we're like, no, we wish, but we're getting there. And then on the kind of small channel side, there's some interesting dynamics. One is when you don't get fired for buying out of home, or excuse me, for buying TV or digital ads. And if that's the incumbent media mix, the incentive to try something new is pretty low at most companies.
Yeah.
Especially when you are unaware or incapable of measuring the ROI. So that's a way that we see a lot of brands scale up their commitment to the channel, is because, and it's kind of an obvious statement to modern marketers, they get proof that it's working, or they can optimize what's not working. So that feedback loop is absolutely critical. And then, the holding company agencies, interestingly, they don't make a lot of money off of out of home. So
Wow.
they're not incentivized to really put it through to their clients as heartily as I think they should. And they don't necessarily have internal technology that helps them stand out, where they may lean on their data and identity graphs and some of the other things they've developed for their larger channels. When it comes to out of home, they frankly don't have a ton, and so they're not incentivized to push it both financially and from a capability perspective. So those are some of the main reasons. But as we make it easier, more transparent, and more ROI focused, it has tremendous upside. And especially when you look at the compression and eventual disappearance of linear TV, some of the regression in digital ad targeting capabilities. These are, that's 80% of the ad market right there. So it won't take much of that budget to really, double or triple out of home, which is a very feasible thing to get it up to 15%.
Wow, that's awesome. All right. Well, we're coming to the final stretch here. What has you most excited about the future at AdQuick? What do you think in the next 6 months to a year are you really excited about accomplishing?
Yeah. So, I mean, every day we're getting new ROI and attribution results for clients that they didn't know they could even do coming in, and they leave with basically a wow moment. So that's amazing. And as we build, more integrations, we think about it as building the bridges, which are the first party data sets. So we want an advertiser to hit AdQuick. They give us permissions to a few, their CRM, their digital marketing. Our algorithms will show them the best possible out of home campaign throughout the country. There's a million plus different out of home locations. Therefore, if you're buying two locations, the combinations get into the trillions. We're pretty sure that algorithms should do that, not media planners or buyers at agencies.
Yep.
The other thing that we're going to get into, which is really exciting, is taking this ROI data and making it much more performance based, where before you run a campaign, if you give us your benchmark data, we can do predictive modeling to show you the expected outcomes in basically any metric, site lift, user acquisition, app download, et cetera, that we can kind of almost guarantee the outcomes, or certainly
Wow.
give a very high degree of statistical significant forecasting, which will be the most powerful thing for any marketer, any CMO to go to their CFO, CEO and say, hey, I have really high confidence we're going to get this many new users, this many new purchases. When you have that level of confidence, the spend is going to increase a lot. And that's really kind of what we're trying to do, along with the rest of the industry and our media partners, et cetera. We're just a force for pushing that larger.
That's awesome, man. Well, look, you've sold me. This has been a very enlightening process just in the last few days, doing the research on you and getting to know the space. And seems like you guys are I hate the Uber of reference, but you guys seem to be really taking a lot of the friction out of this part of the marketing mix that's been a little bit of a mystery to us digital natives. So we're excited to recommend it to our clients, and more specifically, if we get some influencers involved and pour some gasoline on it from a social perspective, I think it's a good fit. So thanks so much for hopping on the show and talking to us a little bit about what you guys are doing over at AdQuick and how you guys are changing the game. And for those of you watching at home, please don't forget to subscribe or share this with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And we'll be back again next Monday at 1 o'clock West Coast with another exciting guest. So thanks again, Matt. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. Good to chat.
All right. Thanks, bud.
See ya.